Okay, welcome students. Good afternoon to you all. Okay, we are going to begin with our first class. Remember, we started we started with demand and supply. We have ended, in fact, we saw everything that had to be seen under demand. Yeah, so we completed the lessons on demand and we are supposed to enter supply. So today our lesson is going to our class is going to be focused on supply, so we're going to introduce supply. But this is how I want us to go about it. We're going to have the first part, in fact, we're explaining on supply, as I'm giving the tutorials on supply. I'll also be flashing back. I'll be taking you guys back to demand. Meaning that if I give the definition to supply, I'll also have to give the definition to demand so that you can be able to compare and understand both principles, both concepts, that is demand and supply. So if I'm treating demand supply, okay, that's what we are going to do today, supply. So when I start introducing supply, as I say something is supply, I'm going to relate it to demand. So if I say something in supply, I relate it to demand so that you can be able to refresh your memories, okay, and understand, get back to, in fact, bring yourself up to date so that you can be able to pick up with the class. Okay, so we are starting. So let us begin. Let us begin with our class. That is introducing supply. What is supply? The theory of supply. What is supply? Now, supply as a meaning, we say the theory of supply is a way in which suppliers behave in order to meet up to their main aim, which is profit maximization. Supply in economics does not mean the entire stock of goods produced and stocked in the warehouse. Meaning that when you produce a good and then you save it in your warehouse, that is not supply. Okay? If you produce, let's say you produce bananas and then you stock bananas in your warehouse, you haven't made it available for sale, you haven't made it available in the market, so that is not supply. So what is therefore supply? What is therefore supply? Definition. Supply is therefore the actual amount of goods that a producer or a supplier is willing and able to put in the market at a particular price within a given period of time. So it is that actual amount, it should be a particular amount, okay, of products that you as a supplier or as a producer, you are willing, there must be that willingness and the ability, which means you should be willing and of course able to supply or put into the market at given prices within a given period of time. So it must be within a given time frame. Now let's look at demand. In demand, we say that demand could be defined as the quantity of goods that a consumer is willing and able to buy, okay, at a given price in a given period of time. While supply is a quantity of goods that a supplier or a producer is willing and able to do what? Put in the market. You are willing and able to put in the market at a given price with a given period of time. Now, due to the fact that suppliers' main objective is profit maximization, they will be willing to supply more when prices are high. All right, so they'll be willing to supply more in the market when the prices are high. In fact, just say for example you're a producer, you produce tomatoes. So what is your main aim? What is your main objective? Of course, as a supplier, you are supplying goods in the market. Your main objective should be making profits. That is a businessman. So you want to make profits. So when is it possible for you as a producer or a supplier to make profits? It's obvious that you will be making profits when the prices are higher. Of course, when the selling price is of course more than the production price. So if you are actually producing, you know that you want to make profits. So you are only willing to supply more in the market when prices are obviously high. Okay, now this takes us therefore to the first law of supply, which states that more of a good is supplied at a higher price than at a lower price. Now, if we look at the first law of demand, we said we demand consumers are willing to consume or buy goods at a lower price than at a higher price. While with suppliers are willing to supply more goods in the market at a higher price than at a lower price. So realize that demand is the reverse of what? Supply. So with demand, the consumers are of course wanting to minimize cost by spending less. They don't want to spend. So when the prices are low, they demand more. While with supply, of course, they want to make profits. So they can only make profits when the prices are high. So as the prices are high, so too are they willing to supply more in the market so as to maximize profit. So that is it. That is why we say the law of supply, the first law of supply, which is the second law of demand and supply. The first law of supply is the second law of demand and supply. So it states that more of a good will be supplied at a higher price than at a lower price. So the supply schedule. What is the supply schedule? In demand, we said a demand schedule is a table of content that seeks to show the various quantities of goods demanded by consumers at various prices within a given period of time. So what is a supply schedule? The supply schedule is a table that shows the quantity of goods that producers are willing to make available for sales at different prices within a given period of time. Remember we said that supply is not effective if the producers don't have the willingness and the ability to make available goods for sale. So the supply schedule is now that table that shows the the various quantities of goods that these suppliers are willing to supply or make available for sales in the market at different prices within given periods of time. Alright, now NB, note, in supply the relationship between price and quantity demanded is positive. Now in supply the relationship between price and quantity is positive. Remember we said in demand that the relationship between price and quantity in demand is inversely related, which means it's negative. They have an inverse relationship when we're talking about demand. And of course, when we say inverse relationship, it means that they don't meet, they don't move together. Alright? In demand, as price goes up, quantity demanded does what? It comes down. While in supply, it's positive. This relationship is positive. Because price and quantity move in the same direction. As price goes up, quantity demanded, quantity supplied goes up. Alright? When price goes up, quantity supplied goes up. While in demand, when price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. So I hope you're beginning to understand the relationship. Now, we are saying that the relationship between price and quantity in supply is positive because price and quantity move in the same direction. Now, such a table, which is a supply schedule, such a table for an individual seller is known as an individual supply schedule. Meaning that an individual supply schedule is a table that shows the quantity of goods that an individual or an individual supplier is willing and able to make available for sales in the market. While a market supply schedule is a summation or a combination of all individual suppliers, of all individual supply in the market at various quantities within a given period of time. Great. Now, the supply schedule, which is the quantities of goods, the various quantities of goods that suppliers make available for sales in the market at various prices within a given period of time, can be illustrated or demonstrated on what is known as a supply curve. Alright? A supply curve is simply a graphical representation of a supply schedule. And a normal supply curve should slope upward from left to right. It should slope upward from left to right. Remember, when we're looking at demand, we said a normal demand curve should slope downward from left to right. a normal demand curve slopes downward from left to right. Why does it slope downward from left to right with demand? A normal demand curve slopes downward from left to right because as the prices are falling, the quantity demanded is increasing. That is why it looks like this. Alright, it slopes downward from left to right because as prices are doing what? Falling, quantity demanded is doing what? Increasing. That is why it slopes downward from left to right. But with supply, a supply curve slopes upward. It slopes upward. Okay, it's a reverse. It instead slopes upward from left to right, meaning that as prices are doing what? Increasing, quantity demanded is doing what? Is falling. As prices are increasing, okay, quantity supplied are increasing. Okay, so that is why a supply curve will slope upward from left to right, because as prices goes up, quantity supplied goes up. Good. Now, the upward sloping curve indicates the positive relationship between price and quantity. As price increases, quantity demanded increases and vice versa. So that is why the supply curve slopes upward from left to right, because as price increases, quantity supplied increases and vice versa. Now the vice versa simply means that as price falls, of course quantity supplied is going to fall in the market. Are we there? Now this is an example, a critical example of what a supply schedule and a supply curve looks like. Now remember we said that this is an example of a supply curve for plantain in the market. All right. Now at the price column we have $2, $4, $6, and $8, and under quantity supplied we have 0, 3, 6, and 9. What do we realize? We realize that as the price is increasing from $2 to $8, okay, quantity supplied of course increases from 0 units to 9 units, and that is an illustration on a supply curve. Okay, now on our supply curve we realize that it slopes upward from left, okay, to right. It slopes upward from left to right. All right, so it slopes upward from left to right. Now when the price is $2, quantity supplied is $0. This is the illustration. When the price is 2, okay, quantity supplied is 0. Now this is a price column and this is a quantity column. Remember that I told you guys that on demand and supply, price must always be allocated on the y-axis, while quantity demanded or supplied must be allocated on the x-axis. Now on our y-axis here we see price, and on our x-axis we see quantity supplied. Now when the price is 2, quantity supplied is 0. Now this is the illustration. We have 2 here, okay, price, and the quantity supplied is 0. That is why we have this here. Okay, when the price increases to 4, quantity supplied does what? Increases to 3. When the price is 4, okay, quantity supplied increases to 3. So this is the allocation. When the price increases to 6, quantity supplied of course increases to 6. Now this is 6. Okay, when the price is 6, quantity supplied increases to what? 6. This is the allocation. All right. Now when the price increases to 8, quantity supplied also increases to 9. So this is 8 and this is the allocation 9. So what does this tell you? It tells you that when price is at its minimum level, quantity supplied is at its minimum. Are we there? And when price gets to its maximum level, okay, quantity supplied also is at its maximum level. Meaning that as price goes up, okay, quantity supplied also goes up, and vice versa. When the price falls, quantity supply falls. That is why we say that a supply curve slopes upward from left to right. And the upward sloping from left to right indicates the higher the price, the higher the quantity supplied, and the lower the price, the lower the quantity supplied. While with demand is the reverse. Demand is slopes downward from left to right, which indicates the higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded, and the lower the price, the higher the quantity demanded. All right, so let us continue. All right, now good. All right, now we have seen the illustration, okay, of our supply schedule and the graphical illustration on a supply curve. Let's move forward. When supply is represented visually on a graph with price on the y-axis and quantity supplied on the x-axis, okay? So remember, I said that at all points in time, when we want to allocate on our graph, make sure that price is always allocated on your y-axis, while quantity supplied or quantity demanded is allocated on your x-axis. Are we there? Now, supply generally supply curves generally slope upward. Okay, this upward slope represents increasing marginal cost with an increased production. Okay, meaning that as the marginal cost of production is high, the production level also does what? Increases. When prices are low, quantity supplied is low. But as price and profit increases, supply increases as well, creating an upward curve. I think we have explained this already. Now, let us look at the reasons why the supply curve slopes upward from left to right. Remember, when we're looking at demand, we also looked at the reasons, those factors that will make, of course, a demand curve to slope downward from left to right. And we saw three factors. Okay, we saw three factors, and these factors were income effect, substitution effect, and the law of diminishing marginal utility. So those are the factors that will make a demand curve to slope downward from left to right. Income effect, substitution effect, and the law of diminishing marginal utility. Now with supply, one of the reasons why the supply curve will slope upward from left to right. Okay, now you should know that in explaining the reasons why the supply curve slopes upward from left to right, these reasons are simply backing the law of supply. Okay, they are simply backing the law of supply, which is that more of a good is supplied at a higher price than at a lower price. Are we there? Now, the first reason, which is the main reason, is simply, okay, the main reason as to the nature of the curve is the interest in profit maximization. Okay, now the main reason why the supply curve will slope upward from left to right is because of the interest, the producer's interest or the supplier interest in maximizing profit. Okay, as a rise in price is an indicator to higher profits. So therefore, producers are advised to supply more, introduce new products in the market, and increase production. On the other hand, when prices are falling, producers will be making less profits, and it might even lead to them closing down, that is, stopping production. So, we are saying that one of the main reasons why the supply curve will slope upward from left to right is simply because of the interest in profit maximization. So because producers or suppliers have as an objective to make profits, it's normal, okay? it's very normal that they would definitely want to supply more when prices are high. So of course, as prices goes up or go up, that is how their supply will increase. And of course, because they want to increase supply, they are therefore willing to do what? Increase production. Okay, because the higher the production level or the higher the productivity, of course, the higher the supply. So the higher the supply, of course, the higher the profit making. So they'll be willing to supply more when prices are high. So when prices are high, they are willing to supply more. That is the first reason as to why the supply curve will slope upward from left to right. Okay, the second reason as to the exceptional curve, okay, so that is primarily the main reason. That is primarily the main reason why the supply curve slopes upward from left to right. So there's just one reason as to why the supply curve will slope upward from left to right, and this reason is simply the interest on profit maximization. The interest on profit maximization. Producers or suppliers will always be willing to supply more when prices are high. And of course, because they want to supply more, they of course will be willing to produce more. That is, because they have the objective to make profits, they will increase production and then supply more products in the market. Are we there? So we now want to look at the exceptionalities. Okay, we now want to look at the exceptions to the law, the exceptions to the rule. Remember, when we're looking at demand, we also looked at the exceptions to the law of demand. And with the exceptions to the law of demand, we were looking at factors that will make the supply curve, the demand curve, not to move downward from left to right. Okay, so now we are now looking at those factors, those exceptions to the law of supply. If the normal supply curve slopes upward from left to right, it means that the exceptions to this law will not make the supply curve to move upward from left to right. Okay, it won't make the supply curve to move upward from left. All right, guys, let's continue with our class. So the exception to the law of supply, that's exceptional supply curve. Now, with this exceptional supply curve, it goes against the law of supply, which states that more of a good will be supplied at a higher price than at a lower price. All right. Now, it means that the normal curve, these exceptions, because they are exceptionally, it means that the exceptions, an exception to, all right, let's read our notes. An exceptional supply curve goes against the law of supply. Here, more is instead supplied at a lower price than at a higher price. A critical situation of an abnormal supply curve is an individual supply for labor. Now, we are seeing that with exceptional supply curve, the normal supply curve slopes upward from left to right, okay, which accepts or affirms the law of supply, which says that more is supplied at a higher price than at a lower price. Or in other words, the higher the price, the higher the quantity supplied. But now, with the exceptional supply curve, it goes against that law. It goes against that rule completely. Instead, with them, more is instead supplied at a lower price than at a higher price. And the first reason, the first factor which leads to an exceptional supply curve is an individual supply for labor. Okay, we know labor is simply human-made effort for work to be done, and the supply for labor is simply, as definition in economics, is simply the man-made available hours. Okay, supply for labor is simply the man-made available hours, or the available hours made by a person for work to be done. Okay, now The first factor for an exceptional supply curve, as I said, is individual supply for labor. And this individual supply for labor leads to what? It leads to a backward sloping demand curve. It means it leads to a backward sloping supply curve. It looks like this, a backward sloping supply curve. Now, let's read on from our notes. The reward or price for supply of labor is wages. Are we there? The reward to supply is wages. Remember, under factors of production, you have land, labor, capital, and entrepreneur. The reward to land is, of course, rent. Okay, wages goes with what? Labor. Are we there? So the reward to labor is wages. And the quantity supplied is the amount of hours a worker will put in for work. Okay, that is why we define supply of labor or supply for labor. Supply of labor as the man-made available hours for work to be done. Okay, man should be willing to is the amount of hours, the quantity of time. Okay, that a person puts in for work to be done. That is a supply for labor. Okay, and the reward to labor or the supply for labor is wages. Now, how then does the individual supply for labor lead to an exceptional supply curve? When the wage rate of an individual starts increasing, he will definitely be willing to put in more hours for work. It's normal. Okay, if you're working somewhere, let's say you're working in a company, and then you realize that, let's say they were paying you 200,000 francs a month, and the following month they increase your salary to 250. You realize that it's going to motivate you. Okay, that increase in your wage, that increase in your salary, of course, in your wage will, of course, it will motivate you to put in more efforts to work. It will motivate you to want to work more. Okay, but what happens when wage rate rises above a certain level? He will find himself reducing the hours of work because he needs more time to spend and enjoy the money that is leisure. Are we there? Time for leisure will therefore be greater than his marginal utility for work when the wage rate rises above a certain level. Okay, so what are we saying? We are saying that with an individual supply for labor, since the reward to supply for labor is wages, of course, it's normal that when a laborer realizes an increase in his wage rate, definitely he will be motivated to work. If he realizes an increase in his wage rate, he will be motivated to work. So he's going to put in more effort. He's going to give in more hours for work. But if the wage rate increases beyond a certain level, that means it goes more than usual. Okay, it becomes exceptional. Meaning that if you increase a worker's wage above a certain level, okay, make it too high, all right, you realize that worker is going to earn too much, and he or she is not going to have time for work anymore, but he or she will be finding more time or looking for more time to spend the money. All right, she's going to be looking for more time to spend this money because she earns too much. So therefore, she needs more time for leisure instead of what? Work. You're already making too much money. So you are not going to see it necessary to actually put in too much work, to put in some time or more time for work. Instead, because you have too much money, you'll be looking for time for what? Leisure. And with this, it tells you that what? The higher now the wage rate, the lower the quantity supply for labor. Are you getting? Meaning that if the higher a consumer supply earns in terms of wage, which means if the consumer, a supplier's wage rate for supply for labor increases above a certain level, he or she, of course, will be putting in more effort, more time for leisure instead of work. So therefore, the quantity supply for labor will do what? Will fall. So we realize that it goes against the law of supply that states that more will be supplied at a higher price than at a lower price, meaning that the higher the price, the higher the quantity supplied. But with supply for labor, the higher the wage rate, okay, the lower the quantity supply for labor. Are you understanding? Because that person now earns beyond a certain level makes it the wage rate is higher above normal, meaning that she now is going to find more time for leisure than for work. Okay, so with supply for labor, with individual supply for labor, the higher the wage rate, okay, of the supplier, the higher the price of the wage rate, of course, the lower the quantity supplied for labor. So it goes against the law. We expected him that the higher he earns in terms of the wage rate, the higher he should be willing to put in for labor, for work to be done. But instead, it's the reverse. As wage rate increases above a certain level, his willingness to work falls. Are we there? So with this one now, you realize it's an exceptional supply curve. So this is let's look at an illustration of the wage rate or the individual supply for labor. Illustration of an exceptional curve using an individual supply for labor. Now, this is the wage rate, which is allocated on the price axis, and this is the hours of supply for labor, or the hours supply for work to be done, or hours for labor is allocated on the quantity supplied area. Now, realize that as the wage rate increases from 2, this W here stands for wages, okay, stands for wage. Now, as the wage rate increases from 2 to 1, that's from W2 to W1, of course, quantity supplied or number of hours put in for work falls from what? N1 to N2, okay? When the wage rate rises from W1 to W2, the number of hours supplied instead falls from N1 to N2, meaning that as the wage rate increases, the price for wage rate increases, quantity supplied for labor does what? Falls. Because that person will instead find more time to leisure about with the too much money or the too much wage that he or she is earning than to put in hours for work. Okay, so it's contradictory. It contradicts the law of supply. All right. Now this is another illustration that tells us that okay, this is the income, the price, and here this is the amount of hours put in for work, which is allocated as X. Now you realize that. Remember, we said that when the price for hours paid increases, okay, that person is going to add time for work. That means it's going to increase his hours for work. Okay, that is why you see from P1 to P2, realize that at P1 it is at this level, P2 the hours of work increases a little bit, meaning that the person will be motivated to work because he has realized a little increase in his income, okay, in his wage rate. But as the wage rate increases further from P2 to P3, instead of him now increasing the number of hours for him to work or for work to be done, he does what? He drops it. It reduces. So you see that at this level P3, okay, the number of hours has fallen relatively to P2 where it was increasing. But now because they have increased it beyond a certain level, it starts falling. When it increases to P4, it falls again. It goes lower. So you realize that at the level of P4, as the worker number of hours increases beyond a certain level, his number of hours for work has dropped. Are we there? So it generally now it leads us to this particular level where you realize that generally when a worker realizes a high increase in wage rate beyond a certain level, his number of hours for work will drop. Okay, an increase in the number of in the price for wage will lead to a fall in the quantity supplied or number of quantity supplied of hours for work to be done. So it goes against the law of supply. Let's look at the second scenario. The second scenario that leads to an exception to the supply curve or an exceptional supply is the fixed supply curve. Now, what is a fixed supply curve? A fixed supply curve is a situation generally where despite the price change, okay, of goods and services in the market, the quantity supplied remains constant. Despite, it's a situation we talk about fixed supply curve. It's an instance of an exceptional supply, okay, which goes against the law of supply. And this particular category under the fixed supply curve, this second level now tells us that there is a situation which is a fixed supply. And under a fixed supply, we are told that fixed supply is that generally it is that situation whereby despite the changes in the prices of goods in the market, the supply for that good remains constant. And generally, this situation is observed in a situation where the good is a necessity, meaning that if a good have an inelastic demand, a good that has an inelastic supply, it means despite the price, suppliers will still supply the good in the market. Okay, despite the price, they will supply. So let's read from our notes. This is a situation in which the supply of a good is perfectly inelastic. When the supply for a good is perfectly inelastic, okay, these types of supply curve arises from a situation whereby the quantity of goods offered for sale remain constant irrespective of the price increase or decrease. So because the supply for the good is inelastic, meaning that inelastic simply means that what? No matter the price change, suppliers will still supply these goods in the market. Okay, it has an inelastic supply. So no matter the price changes, the suppliers must still supply this good. So the supply for the supply for this good is what? Constant, despite the price change. Okay, so example of such supply is land. Now let's look at land. Land is fixed. Okay, land is not geographically mobile, it is fixed. Okay, so no matter the price changes in land, you realize that the supply for land remains constant. If there's a land in Ekondotiti, okay, there are maybe 2 hectares of land in Ekondotiti for sale. Okay, no matter the price for that land remains there. Are you understanding? That means no matter the price change for land, whether the price for that land increases or it decreases, the land is already available in the market. It is constant. It is geographically immobile. Land is geographically immobile. So therefore, if someone has put land in the market and that land has a high price or it has a lower price, the supply for that good, for that land is constant. It's always available. Okay, until someone buys it, it is constant. Whether the price for the land is high or it is low, the land is constant. The next one, okay, an example includes the supply of land and the supply of agricultural products in a short-term basis. Now, let's look at an agricultural product. Let's say tomatoes. Okay, an agricultural product like tomatoes, for example, will have a constant supply despite the price change. Meaning that if, for example, I'm supplying tomatoes. Okay, now if the price for tomatoes is an agricultural product, that's why we say within a short period of time, it's an agricultural product. I am already producing tomatoes. You understand? Because most agricultural products are what? They are perishable, right? In fact, all agricultural products are perishable products. All agricultural products that I know of are perishable products. So it simply tells us that because it's a perishable product, we cannot keep it. Whether the price is high or the price is low, we must still supply. You understand? If they say, for example, the government fixes a price and says that, okay, sell tomatoes at this price, and we as suppliers realize that the price is low and we're not going to make profits, can we keep the tomatoes in our warehouse? We cannot keep the tomatoes in our warehouse because they are perishable. Okay, the tomato is going to get bad. So whether the price increases or it decreases, we must still supply the agricultural products in the market at that particular time. That is why we say it is a short-term basis. Okay, and that is, we are allocating them at short-term basis because they are perishable in nature. All right, all agricultural products are perishable, and even if the price for agricultural products goes up, it fluctuates. Okay, if it goes up or it comes down, suppliers will still supply these goods in the market. They don't have a choice. So the supply for agricultural products are constant, while the supply for land are also what? Constant. So these two scenarios leads to what? A fixed supply curve. The supply for land and the supply for agricultural product, it makes the supply curve to be fixed, meaning that supply is constant despite the changes in what? Despite the changes in price. This is an illustration. So illustration for a fixed supply curve. Illustration for a fixed supply curve. Realize that this is the price, the market price 300. So even if the price increases to 400 or falls to 200, falls down to 200, realize that what? Supply remains what? Constant at 10. It remains constant. When price rises from 300 to 400 or falls from 300 francs to 200 francs, the quantity supplied does not change. It remains constant at 10 units. All right. So we'll look at the two scenarios. We have said exceptional supply curve. The exceptional supply curve, there are two factors. The first factor has to do with individual supply for labor, okay, and the second factor is a situation of a fixed supply curve. So let me explain again. With the individual supply for labor, we explained that when an individual realizes an increase of his wage rate beyond a certain level than expected, the supply for labor is going to fall, because he or she will find more time for leisure instead of more time for work. Okay, so it leads to an exceptional supply curve, because the higher the wage rate, the lower the quantity supply for labor. Are we there? Right. The second scenario is the fixed supply curve. Now, with this fixed supply curve, we have said that there are two scenarios that will lead to a fixed supply curve. Okay, generally a fixed supply curve is a situation where, despite the changes in the prices of goods in the market, the supply for that goods remain constant. Okay, and we have given two examples. The supply for land, which is geographically immobile, okay, despite the price change, the land will be supplied in the market. And the second one is agricultural product. Within a short-term period, because they are perishable, agricultural products will always be made available in the market despite the changes in the price, because they are perishable. They cannot be kept. If the prices are low, okay, producers will make their losses, because they are perishable products. They don't have a choice, they must supply. So even if the prices are low, they will still make their losses. But when the prices are high, they'll be willing to supply more instead. And even when they supply in the market, the supply will still remain constant, because of their perishable products and they are within a period of time. Good. So that we have critically examined exceptional supply curve. Good. Now let's look at determinants of supply. What are the factors that lead to an increase or a decrease in quantity supplied? Determinants in supply are simply those factors that will influence the supply for goods and services. What are those factors that will influence the supply of goods and services in the market? Now, remember, under demand, we look at the factors that influence demand, where we saw taste and fashion, seasonal variation, population size, population structure, prices of other goods, and all of that. So with demand, with supply, we are going to look at the determinants of supply, which are the factors that will lead to, of course, the factors that will lead to increase or decrease in the supply of goods and services. So these factors are simply as follows. We're going to look at these factors. Okay, so we are looking at the determinants of supply. We said that, remember, when we're looking at the determinants of demand, we're looking at those factors that will influence the demand for goods and services. We looked at factors like taste and fashion, seasonal variation, population change, population structure, changes in the price of other goods, and so many other factors, right? We saw about 8 factors. So now we are looking at the determinants of supply. Our interest here is to look at the determinants of supply, which are simply those factors that will influence suppliers to supply more goods in the market or less goods. Okay, what are those factors that will make them to increase the supply for goods or decrease the supply of their goods? Okay, so you are explaining in two ways how it makes how it increases supply and how it decreases supply. So the first factor that we have here, the first determinant of supply, is price. All right, so I read. This refers to the main factor that influences the supply of a product to a greater extent. Unlike demand, there is a direct relationship between price and product and its supply. That is, price of a goods, of a product, and its supply. Okay, remember we said price and quantity they move in the same direction, meaning that the relationship is positive when we're looking at supply. Okay, let's continue. If the price of a product increases, then the supply of the product also increases, and vice versa. All right, it's very simple. It's very simple, guys. That is normal. If you are a supplier, of course, we said that an increase in price will lead to an increase in quantity supply. Okay, so generally, this is the main factor that will influence the supply of a commodity. When producers see that there is an increase in price, of course they'll be motivated because they know that if they increase their supply for goods, they are going to make higher profits. Remember, their main objective is profit maximization. They want to make profits. Are we there? So of course, an increase in the prices of goods in the market will lead generally to an increase in supply for products. Good. The next one, cost of production. Now, under cost of production, we are simply here looking at cost of production as a second factor that determines supply. We are looking at the production cost. What constitutes the cost of production? Producers undergo a production activity, and production in economics is defined as the transformation of raw materials into semi or finished goods for either immediate consumption or further production. Okay, or in other words, you can define production as the creation of utility to satisfy human wants. Now, looking at cost of production, production is a process, okay, of transforming raw materials. Now, because these producers have to undergo the production activity, when they produce and they realize that their cost of production is high. When we talk about cost of production, what do we mean? We are looking at the various costs, what they accrued, what they have spent in producing that good, the amount of money that they have spent in producing that good, okay? Be it physical effort, mental effort, or financial effort, okay? Whatever that they have spent in producing their goods is their cost of production. So under cost of production, we have examples here like the cost of raw materials, cost of stock, cost of warehouse, cost of, in fact, so whatever the amounts that they have spent in producing this good constitute their cost of production. Are we there? Now, if they spend high in producing the good, generally, if the cost of production is higher than the price, are we there? Listen to me very well, students. When the cost of production is higher than the selling price of the good in the market, okay, generally realize that they are going to make losses, right? They will make losses, and in that sense, because they will make losses, they will reduce their supply. Generally, if the cost of production is higher than the cost price of the good, that means if the cost of production is higher than the selling price of the good, generally realize that as a supplier or a producer, you are going to make what? Losses. So because you are going to make losses, what happens to your quantity supply is going to fall, right? So you will be willing to supply less, okay? But if your cost of production is lower than the cost and the selling price of the good, of course you are going to make profits. So therefore, you will supply more. Right? So that is how you explain this concept. Under cost of production, you simply tell the market that what? You tell the market that when the supplier or the producer realizes that the cost of production is higher than the selling price of the good, she tends to default. It leads to what? A fall in the supply of goods and services. But when the cost of production is lower than the selling price of the good, of course they are making profits, so therefore it will lead to an increase in the supply of goods and services. Okay, let's just read this note we have here. It implies that the supply of a product will decrease with increase in the cost of production and vice versa. The supply of a product and cost of production are inversely related to each other. Okay, for example, a seller will supply less quantity of a product in the market when the cost of production exceeds the market price of the product. In such a case, the seller will wait for a rise in the price in future. The cost of production rises due to several. In fact, we are going to go through the notes. But what you have to take home is that when we look at the concept of cost of production, when a supplier realizes that what he has spent in producing that particular commodity is higher than the selling price of that good, it indicates to him or her that he or she is going to make a loss if he sells the good. So definitely she is not going to supply. So generally supply will fall. But when the supplier realizes that the cost of production is lower than the selling price of the good, meaning that the selling price is higher than the cost of production, it indicates what? A profit. Meaning that when she supplies, it means that she's going to do what? Supply more in the market. So that's how you explain the concept. Now the next is weather condition. Now weather condition as a reason why or a factor that determines supply. Under weather condition, we are going to look at two weather conditions. Remember, in Cameroon we have just the rainy and the dry season, right? So we're going to explain it based on these two concepts. Now, generally, a favorable weather condition, of course, favors what? Production. Generally, a favorable weather condition favors what? Production. And if production is favored due to a favorable weather condition, it's obvious that supply for goods and services will do what? Will increase. And if the weather condition is unfavorable, supply will do what? Will fall. All right, so just look at it from that way, and remember that they are from that light. Sorry, remember that there are various products. Also, there are various products, okay, that are favorable to some particular climates. Okay, there are various products that goes with particular climate. Okay, for example, let's look at the note. We say some of the crops are climate specific. Some crops are climate specific, and their growth purely depends on the climate condition. For example, vegetable crops are well grown in the rainy season, while watermelon is better grown in the dry season. Meaning that if you make a mistake and grow a crop like vegetable crop in the dry season, it will not produce well, right? It won't produce well, and if it doesn't produce well, it will lead to what? A fall in the quantity. So guys, as we were saying, if you realize generally looking at the weather condition, you see that if you make a mistake, for example, and grow a crop, okay, you grow a crop in an atmosphere where the weather condition is not favorable as per that particular product, you realize that that crop is not going to do well. And if the crop doesn't do well, of course, it affects production. It affects the productivity of that crop. And by affecting the productivity negatively, it means that there will be a fall in production. And if there's a fall in production, automatically there is a fall in the supply for that particular product in the market at that particular time. So you realize that every crop has a particular season in which that crop is grown. Okay? So when you do the reverse, which does not match to that particular season, you face a fall in the production of that crop. So, in general idea or general concept, a product or in general concept, with weather condition, okay, as a factor that influences supply for goods and services, when crops are grown in favorable or unfavorable climatic conditions, of course, it will lead to increase in productivity, and of course leads to an increase in the supply for that particular good or for goods and services in general. And when goods are being produced in an unfavorable weather condition, you realize that it will lead to a fall in productivity level, and of course lead to a fall in the supply for that particular good or service. Good. The next factor is technology. Generally, looking at technology as a factor that influences supply, of course, if there is an increase or there is an advanced technology level or there's increase in technology, of course supply will increase. That is very, very much very simple and straightforward. And of course, for example, let's look at agricultural products. Someone who comes up with sophisticated means of production, like using means like fertilizers, factory equipment or industrial equipment to produce a particular good, okay, that good would have an increase in production and therefore an increase in supply. So generally, high technology leads to increase in supply for goods and services, and low technology leads to fall in supply for goods and services. So you reading the notes, you understand better. It's very simple. The next one is transport condition or transport condition. Okay, now transport condition. I want to look at a particular country here. Let's look at India. In India, most of their goods after production, they use one means of transportation to supply their goods in the market. In India, okay, I'm saying that this is a practical analysis right now, students. So on this practical analysis, I'm saying that in India, every product that is being produced, be it agricultural product, be it industrial product, okay, all the products pass through one means of distribution or one distribution channel, which is a road, Now, if the roads in such a situation in a country like that where they don't have the roads are not motorable, okay, if the roads are not motorable, it means they are not favorable, and of course because they are not motorable and unfavorable, there will be a fall in the supply for their goods, because they are going to face difficulties and challenges in supplying these goods in the market due to the unfavorable nature of their roads or poor road conditions. Okay, all right, let's just read what we have here. Refer to the fact that better transport facilities increase the supply of products. Transport is always a constraint to the supply of products. As the products are not available on time due to poor transport facilities, therefore, even if the price of a product increases, the supply will not increase. It's very practical. Okay? Even if you produce the world's largest, you have the quantitative advance in production and your capacity in your warehouse is super. Okay? It doesn't change a thing because you don't have the means of transportation, it's not there. Okay? Your roads are bad. So even if you have the products available in your warehouse, then there is no means to make available these products in the market, then supply will not be there. So transport is very, very much important in as much as supply is concerned. So an unfavorable transport condition, which is an unfavorable transportation means, okay, leads to what? A fall in the supply of goods and services, and vice versa. The reverse is true. Okay, a favorable transport condition leads to what? An increase in the supply of goods and services. Okay, the next, government policy. Now, looking at government policy as a last factor here, students, we should look at an indicator. My indicator here for government policy is tax. Okay, so tax as an indicator for government policy simply means that if a government imposes high indirect taxes on production, okay, if let's say we know that indirect taxes are those taxes levied on goods and services. Now, if a government imposes a high indirect tax on goods to be produced, what happens to production? What happens to the cost of production? It increases. And if cost of production increases, definitely there will be a fall in production. Okay, so the high taxes, when taxes are low, definitely there will be an increase in production. If taxes are low, you realize that there will be a fall in the cost of production. And a fall in the cost of production is a favorable condition for a producer, and therefore the supply for goods will increase. So generally, okay, let's look at what we have here. This implies that different policies of government, such as fiscal policies and industrial policy, has a greater impact on the supply of a product. For example, increase in tax on excise duties will decrease the supply of products. On the other hand, if the tax rate is low, then the supply of product will increase. All right? So it's as simple as that. Okay, students, I think that is the end for our today's tutorial. I'm going to see you guys again on, of course, I'll send another tutorial on Tuesday. All right, Tuesday. I'm going to do a tutorial and send to you to your inbox on how to go about our Google for Universities. Remember, we have the Google for University platform where you have the Google Classroom, and on our Google Classroom platform you are going to get all your updates on your lesson notes. Okay, you are streaming, our live streaming, like this one now, of course, you're live streaming, and then you're also going to have updates on your assignments. Everything will be posted there. So even this video will be posted there. So remember, we are going to have a tutorial on how you can go about that particular Google Classroom. Every student, the director has sent a post to you, and I'm sure that all of you guys have that particular communique. Go there, pick your usernames, pick your passwords. All the password is a universal password, okay, created for you upon your email. Now the password is ForMake4U2, okay, ForMake4U2 is a password. So when you go there, pick your email and log into your Google Classroom account. Every student should belong to the Google Classroom account. You will find yourself to be blamed if you are not in that particular system, because that is where all studies will be taking place. Remember, we have on and offline studies here at Polytechnic University. So you must ensure that you belong to that particular page. Now, thank you very much for your time. This is your assignment. Your assignment is for you to read on the changes in the price of other commodities. Okay, there are other factors that will influence the supply of goods and services. Okay, so one of the factors is changes in the price of other commodities, and another one is natural disasters. Right, so that is it for today. Drop your questions in our Google Classroom and your questions will be answered. That is what we're going to move forward next time. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks for your time, and do have a great day. More power.